Welcome, friends. I'm Kalina.
And I'm Tapis.
And you are here with Eat, Read, Sleep, where we vibe with books. And this week we're doing a book that you guys all suggested, actually. It's called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
This book is very controversial, guys. I know it's
definitely a hard one for us to try to script out for the summary. So please make sure you check that out. But yes, controversial. It's actually been banned in prisons. If you didn't know. And it's very popular amongst the Hollywood elite and people in high power. You know, there's rappers and it's mentioned in a lot of songs. And, 50 Cent actually has a book penned with Robert Greene as well called The 50th Law of Power, which is pretty cool.
Yep. If you want to quickly go and summarize some of the stuff we talked about in our main summary, and then we'll dive into our drinks and discussion.
Let's do it. So because there's 48 laws, if we actually went through all of the laws, it would take hours and hours. So what we did in the summary for you guys is we kind of categorized it into 4 main buckets of law. We divided it into subtlety, seduction, deceit, and charm. Yes. So then we grouped it all together and then really highlighted 1 or 2 really important ones from each bucket. So it's really easy to go through. So take a look at that and let us know what you think. But essentially, the essence of this book is that Robert Greene says that we all have this innate desire and need to have power, right? Even if you feel like you don't have it or you don't need it, you actually do. It's just that human nature part of you. And if you don't play the game of power, then you're going to end up being miserable because everyone around you is playing the game, whether they knowingly are playing it or subconsciously playing it. So kind of an interesting thing, because I'll tell you this, when I first dug into this book, I almost felt really wrong for reading it. Did you feel that way?
I did, because it's one of those books that's so aggressive with the way he writes, and also as you're reading, you're like, okay, this is a little intense, but I can see why it's needed.
It's kind of
and you kind of see it,
almost.
And in work, you always hear, the corporate politics is what they call it, but it's kind of like people paying for the power struggle, pretty much, right?
Yeah, I actually, when I read through this the first time, I didn't want anyone to know I was reading this. I almost felt ashamed of reading this, right? So it definitely is a controversial book.
I don't know if you remember this a while ago when you told me about this book and you're like, hey, I have a secret to tell you. I was like, oh,
That's okay. What it feels like.
I'm like, great. This is some, amazing gossip. And she's like, I've been reading this book. It's called 48 Laws of Power. And I was like, okay. And she's like, it's amazing. You should really think it.
I'm like, telling you when I think it's amazing.
Yeah. I was like, okay, like that. And so I just remember how excited you were about it.
Had you read it at that time?
No, that was one of the books I actually downloaded on Audible because I knew it was so popular. And I'm like, I'll get around to it one day. And I remember seeing it was like 11 hours long. And I'm like, this is going to take a long time for me to review it. And then you mentioned it, and that's when I actually started listening to it.
This book was actually recommended to me by a really good friend. I was going through a really difficult time at work. And like you mentioned, it was a lot of the politics and a lot of things going on that I couldn't control. And it made me feel almost like a pawn in what was happening in such a big organization. Yes. And then a really good friend recommended me this book. And he also said, like, don't let people know that you're actually reading this book. And I read it and I was like, oh, I get it, right? But then once I started employing some of the tactics, it actually it works.
Yes, so, it does. Yeah. It does. Okay, so let's get into our discussion. But first, let's take a sip of this wine that we have.
Yes. So we chose wine because it kind of reminds us of the olden days, right? The kings and the queens and the court.
It almost reminds me of, like, how people when they have a really powerful thing, they kind of just sit back and they drink some wine. They just watch the world burn down.
Let's do that, yeah.
Right? Okay. Power. Yes. So I remember that.
Definitely.
Yes.
And Robert does say in that, that is sweet wine.
Yes. I should have warned you about that.
He likens our modern day world to the old aristocratic world, right? Where there's kings and queens and they had to play the game of power, not just with the king and the queen, but with each other as well. So all the courtiers would go around and try to like backstab one another so that they would be the favorite of the masters. So it's very interesting that kind of parlays into our current day situation, even though we don't have kings and queens anymore, or at least in the US, but it's very much so that democratic and politics game that we see every
It's almost
day.
hidden, right? Like,
Very
so
much.
everyone comes off like, oh, we're all about the choice, we're all about teamwork, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, there's like just these decisions and stuff happening around. So it's there, but it's definitely very hidden. I feel like
you have to be so like subtle about it. I like
yes.
the reference. There's this part in the summary that we do, guys, where they say you just gently stab someone in the back with a velvet glove and you
Right.
smile, right? And it's like so conniving.
Yep.
But yeah, unfortunately, you do see a lot of that, especially in large organizations when there is pressure to compete against one another to either move up or be recognized. And it's a game, unfortunately, that even if you don't want to play it, you kind of do.
If you guys watched our last video, it is a die if it is one single dice.
It was bothering me so much. I was like,
I had to Google it, make sure. I'm like, yes, she was correct. It's not dice.
It's a dice. So what we're going to do, toss it back forth to each other, answer a couple of questions, and then have fun with this book, okay?
Yes.
So I didn't tell you. I changed up the questions on here.
Oh, okay.
So you're going to be thrown for a
right.
power struggle.
Okay. This one.
Let me know if you can't read it too.
Did not like about this book.
Okay.
When I first read or listened to the book, I thought it was very aggressive. I personally was kind of taken back because my personality, I'm a very like soft person. Even as a leader, I know my team's like, oh, he's very caring. He's like a big huggable bear kind of thing. I was kind of taken back. I'm like, I don't know if I can really apply these things. Okay. So that's one. I think that was one of the things that it is so aggressive, and it does feel like you should not care what's happening. You should just play the power game, and that's it. However, when I actually start to listen to some of Robert Greene's interviews and some of the podcasts he does, it's just like he does kind of emphasize that yes, this is important, but don't lose yourself in it.
Okay.
Right? Don't change who you are. Which I think the book, when I first listened to it, didn't really connect that too much. I just thought I had to be this person that was just like, I almost envisioned like, from Game of Thrones, Littlefinger. Right, like he's behind the scenes, just like like that. And so I thought that's what I had to be. But it's but what he said in the real life, you don't have to be completely a 180 person.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that some of the feedback or backlash on this book is that people think it's too like you either have to be all this or nothing else. But he does have those reversals that he says in the back of the book, right? Where it doesn't necessarily apply to all situations. You have to know when to apply it and when not to, and just be kind of more aware of it. Yeah. So I think if we're not, as you're reading the book, and like you said, if you're just full in and you feel like you have to do all of that, it's not necessarily the message. He offers 48 great laws. It doesn't mean you have to be all 48 laws at one time.
Yeah. And there are some laws that are more aggressive than others. And there's some laws that I was like, yeah, you know what? That makes sense to me. Okay. You ready for yours?
Yep. Did not like about the book. Something's wrong with this die. Okay. Where does this book apply? So obviously at work, I think honestly, from firsthand experience, it does apply if you are in a big corporation and where, not because you have to be another person, but because, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes there's a lot of pressure where you have to be seen a little more versus, if you go about in your daily ways, then all your accolades may not be recognized by people up above just because they're so busy. So I think that what I have learned in applying this in the corporate world is that you're not being necessarily like deceitful or conniving in any way. You're just kind of being smart and utilizing your resources and kind of, you're showing up when the opportunity arises, and when there is no opportunity, then you're using, I want to say using people at your disposal, but that sounds bad, but you're using the opportunities that are presented for you so that you can overtly get recognized later on. And I think that unfortunately in this type of environment, you kind of have to do that. Otherwise someone else will. Yeah.
I can also see this being applied in the political game too, right?
Oh,
a lot
absolutely,
of politicians will play this game.
Isn't that the same as corporate politics and corporate, same thing?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because as I was reading this book, there's a character that came to mind when I was reading it, which is Frank Underwood from House of Cards. Have you seen that show on Netflix? No. So it's very much a politician. So, he's trying to become the president of the United States. But you can see like some of the stuff that he talked about in this book, that Robert Greene talked about in the book. You can see Frank Underwood imitating that, and so that's why when I was in, I was just thinking of Frank Underwood. I don't know why. I mean, granted, Kevin Spacey has his own like stuff happening, but besides that, character himself.
Yeah, you're right. Because through the book, what I really love about this book is that he gives the laws, and the laws are pretty straightforward, but he gives a ton of examples, right? And a lot of it do mention like presidency, Kissinger, and like all these people that are in politics that have pretty much done this, and it's evident that it has worked.
Yeah. So let me ask you, who is this book not for?
Oh, the faint of heart. I think for someone who's probably a little more close-minded, I think you have to really be able to see different perspectives and really understand that, intentions don't really mean much in this world. Like someone can have really good intentions, but if they didn't do something or it wasn't, something didn't turn out the right way, then it's still going to either harm you or set you up for failure. So you have to kind of put those feelings and emotions aside sometimes. So maybe someone that's like super emotional, I don't want to say that, but if it's hard for you to take things for face value and there's always an emotional connection, then it might be a little hard to swallow this book.
Overly emotional people, because they may not want to accept the truth that it is out there and is being done.
Yeah.
And they're probably one of the people that are being controlled by some of the people that are trying to get power.
I would say they would tend to take things personally as well.
All right.
Ready? Law have you used at work?
Oh, okay. So this kind of does go into one of my favorite laws, which is say less than necessary.
That's an easy cop-out one for you. Okay.
So I am
the ever stoic Tepes.
Yes. I am a very quiet person. Stoic, as people would say. However, that was very true when I first started my career. I was quiet because I was shy.
Okay.
Then, as I started, I listened to this book, and I was like, this is where I can use my reputation as the quiet guy to be a little bit more, playing the game a little bit too. So I think that was the one that I believe I've used the most in my workplace, which is I'm usually the one that's never going to participate. I'm never going to be the one to raise my hands first. I'm not going to just blabber the whole conference call on one thing. I'm just going to be the quiet one. And then my boss would be like, hey, Tapis, what do you think about this? And I'll give my quiet little answer. And he'd be like, oh, okay.
I will share from firsthand experience that does work, because I've been on the same team with Tapas before as peers, and he doesn't say anything. Right. But when he does open his mouth, everyone's like, shh, shh, Tapas is saying something. We have to listen. Yeah. Like, it's really important. You've made your words so valuable and so very few in between that when you do say something, it's like everyone has to listen, because it's like, Tapas is speaking.
Yes, yep. So that's the one that I've used at work.
So let me ask you, don't you get backlash for that? Like, it almost seems as if you're standoffish, or that you don't care enough to participate, to be part of the team.
I have gotten that feedback before. It's like, oh, I really need you to participate more during these calls, and I just say, hey, if my peers are providing the excellent examples, I have nothing else to chime in. If I don't want to just hop on a call and say, I agree,
for
and
the
I think,
sake of saying
right?
something,
because that's one of the things he says in the book as well, is that the more you say and the more you talk, or the more you agree, then you also seem as if you're just a common person. You don't have anything special about you.
Yes.
So I normally would tell my boss or whoever it is, I said, hey, if I don't have anything additional to add to the argument, I'm not going to say anything, because I don't want to just repeat what my peers are saying. All right, you ready for yours?
Yep. Let's do it.
Oh, shoot. All right.
What law have you used at work? Let's do a different one.
Okay.
Favorite part of the book? I actually so if you guys have the book, get the chance to buy the book. If not, we've got links below for you. But if you look, there's actually margins. You can see how I've highlighted. There's margins in red that Greene backs up a lot of what he's saying with either folk tales or historical stories, or just like, it's like two books in one. You get his laws, but then you get all of this like fables and all of that. And the red margin stories were actually my favorite part of the book. And I don't know, I didn't listen to it on audio. Does he also go through on audio? They explain that as well. So I would read the section and then go read the margins, and it just made it that much more enthralling to read. Like, you get really enveloped in this old time historical type timepiece, and it it brings it to life. This book is very visually stimulating, and it's just beautifully put together. So I think that's my favorite thing about this book is that you get an all-encompassing. It's not just a step-by-step, but it's presented in a way that is very powerful.
Yeah. And one thing I like about the book is that it's not meant to be read like a book. Like you're not supposed to go law 1 through 48 in every single sitting, right? You kind of just reflect on some laws. You'll go back and you might just skip to law 11 or 13, whatever it is. You don't have to necessarily go from top down.
Yes.
Because there will be some laws that you don't agree with and you're like, I'm not going to even read that.
Yeah. And Greene actually does say that in the book as well. Like it's written so that you can go to what you need. So whenever you feel any type of like stress or overwhelmness at work, you find a law that you think applies and then you can practice that. And he does say practice. It takes a lot of practice because a lot of these don't come naturally to people, right? It's a game that you have to learn how to play and you have to learn how to perfect the strategies in it.
Let's go into we had my homework, which was pick out my favorite law and my least favorite law.
Yes.
So do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
So for my favorite law, I did pick number 4, which is always say less than necessary. But I would, just for the sake of discussion, I can do another one as well, which is be formless, which is the last law, 48.
48, okay. And why is that? Assume formlessness. By taking a shape, by having a visible plan, you open yourself to attack. Instead of taking a form for your enemy to grasp, keep yourself adaptable and on the move. Accept the fact that nothing is certain and no law is fixed. The best way to protect yourself is to be as fluid and formless as water. Yes. Never bet on stability or lasting order. Everything changes.
Yep. So I think that's the one that always resonated with me is around being unpredictable and also very adaptable too. Okay. So I've always thought in my career that I had to just do A, B, and C to get D. And I learned as I went along that I have to be very unpredictable at times. And at the same time, I have to adapt to situations changing. There will be circumstances thrown my way. There will be other people playing the law power game with me, and I have to make sure I'm going around it in a certain way as well. So I've always thought that I needed to really make sure that I'm formless. I'm not just creating a reputation for who I am.
Different from being resilient, right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Like I said, the water, it can take a shape of a cone or in a dam, whatever it is. Like the water can be
what it is,
and it can change on the fly. So I think that's one thing that I've always tried to do is make sure that I'm open to all of the different changes that are happening, and I'm not going to be thrown away by it. Like some people will see a difference or something happens in their life and they're like, oh my God, I don't know how to do it.
This isn't me, or this
yeah,
isn't
and they're just going to self-reflect. I'm just going to be like, no, you know what? This is a part of it. I have to change my attitude. I have to change my perspective. And then,
all right. What's your least favorite law?
So that's number 15, which is crush your enemies totally. This is the one where, like, when I first listened to this one, I was like, whoa, that's a little aggressive. Like, okay, I don't know. Like, he's like, don't give your enemy a chance to come back. And if they come back, they're gonna end up coming back even stronger and maybe potentially even overthrow you. So you have to go in and say, if you have an opportunity to completely crush your enemy, do it at that time. Do not allow anybody else to come back and get their revenge. Mm-hmm. So, and I think in the book, he also gives an example of somebody, I forget who it was, but they allow somebody to just kind of instead of overthrowing them altogether, it's like, oh, I'm gonna give them pity and I'm gonna let them go, and that person ended up coming back and overthrowing them again.
Yeah.
So it's important to that, and I was just like, I'm a little nicer than that. I'm not gonna completely ruin someone's career based on that.
So I'm going to jump on that because that is also my least favorite
as well.
Crush your enemies totally. I think this is why we vibe well together. I am a big believer of, fate and karma and the universe. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's better just to let my enemies destroy themselves, right? Not that I want to say I have enemies, but at some point it's not my responsibility to crush them, right? Mm-hmm. There are some things that maybe I need to say or do, but also at some point, like, I no longer need to be a part of it because that shouldn't control my consume my time and my energy to try to crush someone, right? I feel like personally there's better things that I can do with my time than try to crush out that little last ember that I feel like might come back. And maybe if it does come back, then I'll figure out how to be stronger and better to deal with it then. But to crush someone completely, it says in here, crush him not only in body but in spirit.
Yeah.
So it's like totally like bringing someone down, and that's just not how I vibe with, right? So that's the one that I'd be like, I'm very uncomfortable with that.
Yes. So what's your favorite?
My favorite one is law number 10, infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. And I am, earlier we talked about like emotional people. I am one of those people, right? So that's why like this book initially was really hard for me. I had to learn and practice a lot of it to feel comfortable doing what I was doing. And I always felt not necessarily an empath, but I felt bad for people and I wanted to connect with them and I wanted to help them. But I've learned, especially recently, that there are just some people that you cannot help and it's not my responsibility to help. And their energy and their negativity just brings everyone else down. Like no matter what I do, I just can't help them. And at the end of the day, it's just a waste of energy. So
what would it look like in a political like a setting or a corporate setting? Like
at work, what have I done? I think leaving a company might be one thing, but you don't want to leave just because of one person. But I think that, you threw me for a loop right there. Being very surface on what you have to say to them, right? Just limit interactions. You don't have to provide more. You have to create more of a relationship than you really need to. And I think that's where I had always gone wrong, is that I always felt the need to create relationships everywhere I went. Like I wanted to connect with everyone, and I've learned that it's not absolutely necessary. It's actually a detriment to you if you do that. Sometimes you just have to be honest about it. Like this is our working relationship and this is as far as we can go, and just being upfront about it.
Yeah, because a lot of those people will, like you said, bring your energy down and they'll pull you down with them.
Yep.
And that ends up, again, not allowing you to play the game and play the power game as well.
I'm really big on like the universe energy vibrations. And when someone just has that negative vibration, you can feel it. Like it just ruins my day. I can see how it impacts other people. And it's more harmful to entertain than to just shut down altogether and just walk away from. Thank you for joining us today for the 48 Laws of Power. Cheers to playing the game. We hope to see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.